welcome to Movie RX, where I prescribe entertainment one movie at a time. I am your host, Dr. Benjamin, MD. What does the MD stand for? I'll let my guest give it a whack today. But first, I'm going to talk about my guest. My guest is actually in studio today. And returning again is Jamie from the Roundtable Mindset. Welcome back, Jamie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
What does MD mean?
Oh, that's easy. Major dork.
Of course.
But I don't mean like major dork as in like a big dork. I mean major dork as in like high-ranking dork.
You know what? You've got your MBA, right? Your major butthead something.
Major badass.
No, major butthead anus. Yep, major butthead anus.
No. I do not accept that, and I don't know if we can swear on your podcast. But
we can. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Not family friendly. We're good. Okay, so we might as well get right into the movie. The information about the movie, I guess we'll start with. It's a newer flick, and it's medicinal for me, honestly. And it kind of changed my mind about Jake Gyllenhaal. Today we're doing The Guilty.
Changed your mind, so now you don't like Jake Gyllenhaal?
Well, no, I with Jake Gyllenhaal, I was always kind of under the impression, because of things like Donnie Darko and Jarhead and a lot of those other movies. I just always kind of felt like he was an angsty teenager playing an angsty teenager. Like, he wasn't really acting. He was just being himself.
Was he good at it, though? I mean, he was good at
it. He
that's
was really good at
right?
it. Well, of course. But nobody gets in as many movies as Jake Gyllenhaal does with not being good at it. But like that's pretty much always been his persona in so many different things. And we'll get into part of the reason why it was just why this movie was so important in changing my mind about Jake Gyllenhaal. So as we get into some of the other stuff, but as for the basic info for this movie, it's a Netflix original, and it was released in 2021. It was directed by the great Antoine Fuqua, which I can't even start with how many movies that man's done. They're just incredible movies.
Plus, he's got a cool name.
Oh yeah, I mean, Antoine.
You can't help but have like great movies with a name like that. It's
well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's why I like Denis Villeneuve movies so much. I mean, his name looks like Dennis Villeneuve, but
yeah,
it's Denis Villeneuve. Yeah. Anyway. So The Guilty, it stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Riley Keough, and Peter Sarsgaard, this is not the first movie that Sarsgaard and Gyllenhaal have been in together. They were also in Jarhead together. Yeah, he was his spotter.
I'm not gonna lie, it's been a long time since I've seen that movie. It's making me want to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, it is a really good movie. Sarsgaard he's married to Maggie.
Yeah. Really? That's so cool.
Yeah, it is pretty neat.
See, now I want the backstory. Like, did Maggie meet him because they were in Jarhead together?
Because Jake's parents made him take her with him to his friend's house to go film a movie, like
to keep him from being an angsty teenager. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Probably not.
Now, I don't remember. Is Jake older than Maggie? I feel like Maggie's the oldest, isn't she?
You know, I really couldn't tell you. I'm not that kind of a movie guy.
Oh, okay.
I'm not the celebrity guru. I'm a movie guy. So
well, clearly I'm not necessarily a celebrity guru either. I just have a lot of curiosity about it, apparently.
Okay.
But if she is the older sister, I could totally see their parents being like, okay, Maggie, just go make sure he's fine.
Right. Let's see here. So we've got, actually your co-host had made a suggestion to read a description about the movie at the beginning of the episode. So, and I've kind of been taking to that a little bit here. So thanks for the suggestion, Malin. IMDb descriptions is kind of what I've been going off of. And the IMDb description for The Guilty is a demoted police officer assigned to a call dispatch desk is conflicted when he receives an emergency phone call from a kidnapped woman. It is one sentence.
What? I'm sitting here. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's all they give you?
Just one sentence. And, you know, I mean, it's enough. I mean, it tells you exactly like a very simple premise of the movie.
Well, yeah, but that's not going to make me want to watch it.
Yeah, but if they can't, I mean, they can't really tell you a whole lot more. I mean, without getting into spoiler territory, and you don't want that in a description. Maybe in a movie podcast, that's okay. But
well, I suppose.
But definitely,
you did put it out ahead of time,
right?
So
let's see here. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fair description from IMDb. Now, we'll go ahead and get into the thick of the conversation on this, and there is a lot to unpack in this movie. I loved this movie. I found it when I was we were out of work for 2 days because of being snowed in January of 2022. We came across another movie called Prisoners, which had Jake Gyllenhaal in it, and it just kind of had me go on a Jake Gyllenhaal bender because I really liked that one.
Is that a thing?
It apparently
Jake Gyllenhaal bender.
I do that though. Like I watch a really good movie with an actor, and then like if they do a really great job in a movie that I'm seeing for the first time, then it just makes me want to watch more movies with them in it.
Okay, that's absolutely fair, because I could go down the Edward Norton rabbit hole or the Johnny Depp rabbit hole, or I mean, I have a few too. So yeah. Julia Roberts, that's another one I do.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's just anybody in a new movie that I've never seen before. If they give a really great performance in a movie, I'm invariably going to spend a day or two watching their movies. But it gave me a lot of respect for Jake Gyllenhaal. Because of that, I spent, a good portion of the second day of this 2-day thing looking up Jake Gyllenhaal movies. The first day was completely taken up by John Wick movies. So, yeah. But yeah, no, I don't know. This movie was it was different, and I know exactly why. But tell me kind of your take on this movie.
I hadn't heard of the movie before. I'm a Jake Gyllenhaal fan. When I watched this, I was like, I don't know. It was captivating from the word go. Like the first 5 minutes of the movie had me roped in. I didn't pull my eyes away from it after that. And it was there was interesting things in the way it was filmed. There was interesting things in the storyline. There was interesting things in the characters. I just I was riveted from the word go. I was also really exhausted at the end. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, for a movie where it literally is close-up shots of all of like what 2 characters that you actually see, everybody else is like on the phone.
Well, and that right there is exactly why I had gained so much respect for Jake Gyllenhaal in this movie. We'll take a moment for some technical movie making aspects here. So you ask any movie maker, director, anybody, you ask them what an actor's moneymaker is, and they will tell you that it's this frame here. It's just right around the face. It is the close up. And that's because that is their greatest asset for drawing emotion out of a scene, and for being able to convey enough emotion to transfer that emotion onto the viewers. Now, with so much of this movie being in close up, you're spending a lot of time connecting with the character. You're spending a lot of time really focusing on how they feel, what they're thinking, and all of their emotions. And on top of that, it is extremely exhausting to be in close up for that much time. Even short close ups in filming regular movies is exhausting work. a lot of people would look at something like that and be like, come on, what's so exhausting about that? You know, you're an actor, you act whether the camera's 10 feet away or, you know, whatever. Well, when they're shooting a close up, they don't have a long lens on the camera. Like, I mean, it is a very short lens, and they have that camera less than 10 inches from your face. And
Mhm.
it's right in your face. And if you don't think that is stressful, like I've got an experiment for you to try.
No,
Take
I don't need an experiment. I mean, COVID, service delivery in my work during COVID was all on FaceTime. It was or all on Zoom. And so it was exhausting. You could spend, and I did often spend 6 hours a day on Zoom.
right,
And at the end of the day, I had felt like I had ran a marathon. It was emotionally exhausting to watch myself talk on Zoom all day long.
right.
Um,
And
yeah, and it's
it's
all
really no
close
different.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now for my listeners, if you take your cell phone, go hand it to your partner, your kid, your friend, your coworker, whatever. Take your cell phone, put it in the highest definition video possible, and hand them the phone and tell them to put you in a close-up frame and start recording. Tell them to record a 15-second video. You are going to feel so uncomfortable at the end of 5 to 10 seconds
Right.
of having this camera right in your face, because it's almost oppressive. And
Hmm.
Jake Gyllenhaal did that for an entire movie. He spent the vastest majority of the time in close up, and it didn't affect his character once. And not once did I doubt that he was an ostracized cop at a call center. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he held it, and he did a really great job.
Well, and it really set a mood for the whole movie too. I mean, it was like the lighting was dark, like it was a call center, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very shadowy, very dark. There were a few people there, but you don't see them. It was, they were blurred off in the background unless they were in the scene, and that just didn't happen very much. And that close up space and his I don't know, can we call it moody and broody? I mean, he was clearly as you go into the movie, you kind of see that he's going through some things, and that didn't take very long to figure out anyway. So this whole I mean, the whole setup was super I don't know, I guess for lack of a better word, intimate. Like
Oh yeah,
you just really felt like you were in the space, places where you shouldn't be. Like you were listening in on things that you shouldn't be listening to, you know?
right. Well, and some of the other really cool things about this movie, Antoine Fuqua, when he filmed this movie, um, it was filmed during the pandemic. And I don't know if you remember, but a lot of the things that they were doing for movies and stuff like that were put on hold because
Mhm.
so many people are required on set and things like that. Well, Antoine Fuqua was he was exposed just a few days before filming, and this was back when quarantine was 2 weeks, like 2 full weeks. Well, he couldn't be on set, right?
Right.
So those laws were also in place for social distancing. So you'll
Mhm.
notice that at all times in this movie, everybody is so far away from each other, and it was because of social distancing.
That's crazy that because it is, now that I think about it, that makes perfect sense. Um, I mean, the pandemic might have forced it into that, but it was super effective. I
Hmm.
mean, and it makes me wonder how much the plan for the movie changed. Like, was there going to be live action scenes that weren't in the movie? Stuff like that. That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Right. And then it was filmed in 14 days. So
Oh,
the entire time that it took them to film this movie, Antoine Fuqua uh, was supposed to be quarantined. And so what he ended up doing, they have these buses, like these vans in Hollywood that you can rent. you can direct movies and stuff like that from like the parking lot. And so he ended up using one of those.
Like a
Um,
SWAT van?
kind of. It's kind of
Like
like
SWAT direction van?
or something, yeah. And
Please tell me there's like 1-800-Flowers pasted on the side of it.
no. I don't remember what they're called. It's like Spark Van or something like that. It's got some kitschy name, but
I
um
know, but to fit in with the theme, I mean, they could just put, Al's Plumbing Service on the side and put the cones out and
to
really make
fit
it
with
look
the
like
theme of, get the hell out of my face while I direct this movie.
undercover cop stuff. I don't know.
No, I don't
Anyway.
think so. But but yeah, he got one of those vans and did that, and then he was apparently he liked it so much that ever since filming this movie, he's had one of those vans even without having to quarantine. So yeah,
Wait,
apparently it's effective.
is he using that exclusively or is he on set too? Because that would make me kind of sad.
Well, I mean, if it's in the parking lot, I'm sure he can go in when he needs to. Um,
Well,
but
yeah,
um, but I don't
I don't
know.
know. That's kind of weird to me.
As far as I'm concerned, if you're in a van where you have access to all of the video that you've recorded and that you've shot, and you can see multiple camera angles on one side of the van, you can get the idea of what you want to go in what order and stuff like that. But I mean, again, that's all filmmaking technique that is just, it's good stuff. But you'd kind of talked about, the character and everything like that. And so that kind of brings to mind talking about the character, Joe Baylor. Um,
Yes.
now,
The
now,
character. The character. Because there's really only one memorable, well, maybe a couple, but Joe Baylor. It's really all about him. That's
right.
the only one you see for the most part.
Yeah. And you also see that he's an asshole. Like, I mean, for the majority of this movie, you're sitting here thinking, God, what a dick.
No, speak for yourself. That wasn't at all what I was thinking. I it was okay. One of the first when he took the first call, he said, "I'm Officer Joe Baylor, number whatever."
Hmm.
And so that instantly clued me in that there's something's amiss here. So I guess I didn't feel like he was I mean, he made some asshole moves.
He was
Like,
insensitive. He was condescending and demeaning, all
well,
of which are not good for people who are calling for emergency situations.
but he's hurting.
And he was also insensitive, condescending, and demeaning to his coworkers.
Well, sometimes hurt people do things like that.
Right.
So
Well, what it
I didn't
is, what it is,
I didn't label him that is all I'm saying.
right. But before I say what I'm going to say, I'm not doing any general blanket statements about any groups of people. I think what they were trying to convey is that he's an asshole cop. Like, he is a hard ass cop, and he's one of those that is very intense when he's doing his job. And I think that they were really trying to make it so that he was a person that you didn't like to begin with. Now, I mean, that would be different for you because you shit rainbows.
I do not.
I'm
Okay.
gonna go ahead and pull up my thing here, and we're gonna take calls. I'm gonna see if I can get Malin to call in. Malin, does Jamie shit rainbows?
That is not a fair assessment. I just choose to give people the benefit of the doubt,
You're
and
strength based.
yes, I try. But see, and even that, I mean, I'm not going to disagree and say that that wasn't what they were trying to get across, but I think as the movie goes on, you see the torture. You know what I mean? Like you see
Hmm.
the pain and you see the breaking, the brokenness, and you see in this case, it's like he was trying to redeem himself by righting the situation. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So, and to me, I have to believe that the vast majority of police officers get into the work because they want to protect and serve.
Right.
And I have to believe that. But I also know that that is probably one of the most underappreciated jobs and
Hmm.
one of the biggest. I also think that it's really underrecognized the amount of trauma that those guys and women, men and women both must go through in that line of work. The things that you see and the things that you experience
Well,
and
and
the
not
pain.
even just with criminals. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, uh, when when there's an accident on an interstate
Mhm.
at 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour, and
Yeah.
the first ones that get there are officers. They're law
Yeah.
enforcement officers,
Yep.
and they're the ones who get there and see, if it's, an old guy in there, if it's a young couple with two kids, and they're the first ones that see the things that happened.
Yep.
And I couldn't imagine, especially in Los Angeles. Like, could you
Yeah.
imagine being a cop in Los Angeles? We're in the Midwest where it's like, what,
Right.
what oh, some guy stole tools out of somebody's shed last night, but
Wh-
like this,
well,
I mean, not that
and
that's not important.
the big difference in a big city like that and locally would probably be that when you come up on that accident, there's a high likelihood that you know who it is,
Right.
and I think that's a whole nother level of challenge. But I think in that line of work, I would imagine that in that line of work, you must see so many things that not only could be traumatizing, but also the fact that you are seeing so much awful, you know what I mean? So
Right.
much yuck that has to, I mean, it has to play some effect over time in your own morale and your own ability to see the best in people. I could imagine being very jaded after a few years on that job. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I guess I don't get a sense that he intended to be that way. I really, I don't know. My heart kind of broke for him from the beginning because Officer Officer Joe Baylor doesn't belong behind the desk of a dispatch center,
Right.
and something
Well,
must have put him there.
I still don't think that's the intention. I think that the intention was that you start off not liking him, and that
Oh, I suppose.
over time you're supposed to start, well,
Of,
basically as the movie goes. Like, the
of
whole
course, it's
movie is
Jake
that.
Gyllenhaal, so I'm gonna like him anyway. I mean,
Right.
I'm saying like,
It's the
yeah,
eyebrows.
probably.
But I think the misconception is that I'm saying that there's something wrong with asshole cops. Really, there's not. What you're talking about when you're talking about that asshole cop, what you're talking about is a cop with a lot of intensity. And those cops have a ton of value, especially in a situation like what's in this movie. Give it some perspective. Now we're going into your podcast's realm. Some perspective here. What if
Welcome.
what if, he took that call from Emily and found out that Emily was abducted,
Hmm.
and that she was being taken against her will in a vehicle, with a man that she was afraid of. Because of the cop that he was going to stop at nothing to make sure that she ended up safe. What if Emily was your sister or your mother, or, I mean, just a loved one, then a cop with that kind of intensity, you don't care if they're an asshole or not. You want them to be the one that's on the job, because
Yeah,
they're going to do anything, and they're going to stop at nothing to get your loved one back safe.
right.
That's kind of what my point is with this thing, is that it's not like, by saying that he's an asshole and that he's an asshole cop, I'm not saying that he's, that he needs to be, written off or forgotten or whatever, but he has a purpose, and it is definitely not in a 911 call center.
Well, what I would hope is that people who watch this movie, there are subtle hints across most genres that have like first responders and law enforcement and things like that in it. There's subtle hints about the toll that that job takes on them personally,
Hmm.
emotionally, and mentally. And this to me was such a great example of um how when left unrecognized or unnoticed, it can really tear a person apart.
Hmm.
And I imagine, the thing that he did, that thing that he did, I don't imagine that that happened in a vacuum. I think that those things happen. Not always. I mean, let's be real. There are just jerks, right? There are just people who are not good people.
Right.
But that thing that he did, that thing that happened, I don't imagine that that happened in a vacuum. And it doesn't make it okay, but it does to me emphasize how valuable and important and necessary it is for society to not overlook the trauma and the challenges that these servants, these public servants who give up so much to provide for safety and security and protection for us. It has to be recognized, it has to be addressed, and it has to be okay to be addressed, because I think that there's some culture within most departments that that's not okay to talk about.
Right. My feeling on this is, I mean, we have cops in the family, you know,
Hmm.
like, we have cops in the family in contact with things that have kind of sparked the climate involving police and the work that they do,
Right.
and
Hmm.
some of those more cultural things. Like someone would think that, that we would side with police like unconditionally. If I'm going to be realistic, and of course I'm just speaking for myself as the host of this podcast, that this podcast is both Black Lives Matter and Thin Blue Line, because both are important. That only really plays into the story mostly at the very end of the movie, because you're not entirely certain
No,
what it
you
is
know
that
something.
happened. Right.
Yes, there's
And
something, but you don't know what it is.
right. Even when he tells Emily what it is that he did, you still don't know what it
No,
actually is.
no, you
Um,
just have some general idea.
until the very end of the movie, when it's the reporters telling you, you know, police involved shooting and all of that stuff.
And I honestly, now that you say that, what an interesting way to play that in 2020, when that was such a flashpoint time for
Mhm.
police brutality and things like that. Like, I wonder if that was intentional, because that was
And that's what I mean by there's
mm,
so much to unpack in this movie. Is I
yeah.
think the point of this movie is, I think that a large portion of the point of this story was that Black Lives Matter, and there is a thin blue line, separating us from chaos,
Yeah.
and how important both of those arguments are.
Hmm.
That was part of what was medicinal for me. It helped me to kind of come to terms with that, because I did struggle a lot, thinking we've got a cousin who puts it on the line for his family every day.
Hmm.
And I mean, and not just cops, there's also other civil servants, like, firefighters and things like that in our
Yeah.
family. But to kind of come to terms with that, my family is a part of that system that is flawed. It was really difficult for me, to
Yeah.
to think about it and talk about it and things like that. This movie really helped me kind of ground, and that was why this movie was medicinal for me.
Well, and just to add to that, I think it's important to remember too, and maybe this story is just one way to look at it, but it's important to remember that the systemic racism and systemic biases and systemic injustices are systemic. It's not one place.
Right.
I mean, there was a flashpoint. There was a big thing that happened in 2020 to highlight policing in America and the challenges that are there and the problems that are there. But that's not the problem. The problem is systemic. It's a system. And I think that is I think when we can understand one piece of it, it helps us understand the next piece of it. When you understand that, it helps you see the big picture. And I have lots of opinions, um, lots of opinions and lots of feelings, quite frankly, wrapped up into um, the racial tension and the racial unrest that happened in 2020.
Mhm.
It did a lot for me to learn about my own biases and my own privilege and what that looks like and what that even means, because I didn't see it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that um it kind of makes me look at this movie in a different way too, knowing when it was filmed, knowing. I think what's really important is to remember that there's stories, and these are real people, and you know what I mean, like there are real people behind the news headlines, and there's real people who experience different things, and until, I mean, okay, throw it back to my podcast again, until you can take a moment to walk in someone else's shoes and to really understand another perspective on it, it's impossible to assume what they're going through. And you get on a 911 call, you get however many minutes on the phone with that person, and look at the story behind that person in this instance, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it was a good exercise in perspective, because um I assume what happens on those calls. You know what I mean? I assume I know what
Right.
happens in those call centers. And it was an interesting look inside of a possible scenario in a call center, and what that must look like, and what those people must experience in a day.
What happens in
Um,
those call centers is that somebody taking the call is making fun of the guy who got robbed by the hooker that he picked up.
well, that was a thing. Yeah. And quite frankly, though, don't you think? I don't know. I know some people in medicine. And I mean, they make some pretty crass jokes. And I think that's like a coping mechanism. You know what I mean?
Right.
And doing it with the right people in the right setting is probably okay. For those of us that are living our lives like rainbows and unicorns, I, I'm probably not the person, because I'm going to be like, well, So just a thought, but
Right. So there's this part. I mean, it's after he realizes that you know that
right,
that
right.
there's other factors involved. It was kind of after all of that. Baylor calls Henry, and he calls him
The
to,
kidnapper,
yeah,
right? The assumed kidnapper.
right, and he kind of talks to him about why didn't you just tell me, and I've actually got a soundbite for that. I'll play that here.
Why didn't you just tell me? You should have just called the police and let us take care of Emily.
Why?
I want to help her.
Huh? Oh, you want to help her?
Yes, that is my job.
I tell you something, nobody helps. We get doctors, lawyers, social workers, nobody else. This is fucking nobody. You're trying to tell me a cop's gonna help me?
I'm trying to help.
Oh, yeah, fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. My son. Yeah, my son. My son. My son is dead.
So
Hmm.
first off, that is a round of applause for Peter Sarsgaard. His
Mhm.
voice acting in that is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Such a good job. But the reason I picked that sound bite was because I think, especially in the work that you and I do, we see some things kind of like that, where he's talking about how he and his family looked for help. I mean, he specifies lawyers, doctors,
Mhm.
social workers.
Mhm.
None of them help. They all say they
Mhm.
can, but they don't. When we're talking about systemic problems, that is a systemic problem.
Yep. Well, and that's, it's interesting, because I think what I didn't understand before I began the work that I do, I'm a peer support specialist. I work in human services. I work in nonprofit, and I work with families who are struggling through the various systems of care, right?
Mhm.
And I think what I didn't know or understand before I got there is how siloed our system really can be. So when you talk to a doctor is focused and honed in on medicine, like the physical health and wellness of a person. You talk to a counselor, and they're focused and honed in on the mental health and well-being of a person. You talk to a social worker, and their role is really to, well, it kind of depends on the type of social worker, but to diagnose problems and offer solutions. You talk to like children and family services, and their role is to make sure that children are protected. School focuses in on education. And as a parent, as a person, I'm supposed to bring all these things to the table and figure out where help is needed. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
it can be super overwhelming. And I imagine this is one of those families that must have fallen through the cracks. You know what I mean? This is one of those families who a doctor's telling me one thing, a counselor's telling me another thing, a lawyer's telling me another thing altogether, and nobody takes time to stop and listen and dig deeper than the surface. And
Right.
how often do we see that? How often do we see you know, charges brought up, and no one stops to look at what the root of that is, what caused this?
Well, and not only that, but you say this is one of those families that slipped through the cracks, that got sifted through the system.
Mhm.
The thing that sucks about that is that from a general standpoint, you can say 1 in 20 families slips through the cracks, but it's not until you put yourself as that family
Mhm.
that you realize just how bad 1 in 20 families slipping through the cracks is. Why?
Yeah.
Because one family that gets overlooked when they're asking for something, one family that gets overlooked when they are truly struggling because of a mental health crisis like this one, or something similar. One family is one too many.
Well, and let's talk about the why in some of that. And part of that, honestly, part of that is was a springboard for the podcast that I host. Is what helped me the most was to be able to put myself in someone else's shoes and say, what were the reasons that we got here?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things? And so, yeah, maybe the family didn't reach out for help. Maybe they didn't know they could.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of stigma and a lot of fear around some of these systems, and we can't do anything about that. Or maybe they tried to get help and we're like the last one we talked about, like, I can't sleep, doc. Well, get yourself some valerian root and take a nap, dude. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, maybe they tried to get help and were kind of shut down because there was no relationship with a provider, and all kinds of things. They do they have a support system, so I think it's another piece of the perspective in this movie that I thought was so good. And even at this point in the movie, for Baylor, when he's starting to realize that, oh, I was wrong, that kind of emphasized to me how often that must happen. How often
Right.
do we have someone walk through the door and we assume we know, we assume we can, we've seen it enough times that we can just diagnose it from the word go. We know that, oh, it's addiction, it's mental health, it's whatever it is. And we're wrong
Mm-hmm.
because we don't know, because everyone is different and every situation's different. So,
Right.
yeah.
It boils down to understanding,
Yeah.
being able to put yourself outside of yourself long enough to realize that you're still an individual, and there's so much different, that really so many things can't be predicted.
Right. One size does not fit all, and unfortunately, I think most let me do also say that I feel like this is shifting. I do feel like there have been major strides and big changes that have really brought us a long way
Oh
in the
yeah,
way things like this are handled. And I do think
no
that there are
doubt.
far less families that fall through the cracks than there used to be. And there is no shade to be given to any professional that's in a helping profession that's trying to help families. Because we are human beings too, and we get it wrong once in a while too. But this will forever be my battle cry, that until each family can be treated as they need to be treated on an individual basis, each person who needs treatment of whatever kind can receive that on an individualized basis, exactly how they need it. We're always going to be at risk at having those families. So I do think that there have been improvements, and I have to recognize that, because some of the horror stories I hear, even in my own work from back when I mean, really, if you think about, and I feel like this fits because it is a mental health crisis that this woman is experiencing, right? Emily is having a mental health crisis. The amount of change since like SAMHSA, that happened in the late 90s. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton were huge in starting this revolution about like mental health and awareness and shifting the treatment and things like that. There's been massive shifting since our government has recognized the value and importance on mental well-being. But we do still
Well,
have a ways to go. So
and that's kind of actually my second soundbite that I have here. I'm gonna play that real quick.
okay.
Because last November, we the discount ran out, man. We said we tried, then we tried to do it without our meds. Oh my god. I couldn't pay for them, because oh my god.
Oh, I mean, it really hits you.
So
It
many
really
thoughts.
hits you in the heart.
Yeah.
This guy that has been demonized for the first, 20, 30 minutes of his existence in this movie. Suddenly you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a villain. He is simply a man that wanted his family to stay whole. There's a serious deficiency when it comes to attention to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about that a lot, like we say that it's so much better, that it's gotten so much better, like even from when I was a kid, going to see a counselor had so much stigma attached to it. And, now everybody has a counselor if they want one. I mean, if they can find one that has openings.
Well, I was going to say locally, that's not the case, but
Right. But I mean, well, yeah, in like what Jen and I had mentioned in a previous podcast, where we live is still a little bit behind in that understanding with mental health and its importance. That oftentimes people are still ridiculed for going to a counselor or having mental health conditions addressed. It's not the same everywhere, but I think that there is still plenty of deficiency nationwide in emphasizing just how important it is.
mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that addressing mental health would probably improve overall health.
Well, I don't remember if I was reading it in a book or if I was listening to a training. I can't remember what it was, but for some reason it was like, I don't know. It was like a stroke of genius when I heard it. And it was this concept that if there was no trauma, there would be no need for most of the rest of the mental health system or children and family services or right? Like if you look at the amount of people who are experiencing difficulties in all of the areas of their life, a lot of times it goes back to trauma, some
Mm-hmm.
traumatic thing that happened that wasn't dealt with or wasn't effectively healed or worked through. And if we could cut out the trauma, then we wouldn't have repeating cycles of abuse. We wouldn't have repeating cycles of substance use. We wouldn't have repeating, generational cycles of domestic violence and all kinds of things. Now there are some mental health conditions that are not trauma based, right? There's things that are chemically in your brain and things like that. So it's not like it would clear all of that. But the amount of services that would be required if we could, as people, take good care of each other, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and if we could teach our kids the tools on how to deal with things that are difficult and how to access support when they need it so that we can organize the hard things that happen and know how to deal with it, it would make a huge difference. It could change a lot of things. And that's just not where we're at as a people. So yeah, I think the part in that just kind of broke my heart too is we couldn't afford the medicine.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I clearly, okay, just so we're all clear, I am not a therapist, a counselor, a social worker. I am a person with a high school diploma and a little bit of college under my belt. But I am not a diagnoser. But what it sounds like this woman is dealing with is heavy. It's heavy,
Mhm.
but can be really successfully treated with medication from what I
Well,
understand.
and if not medication, I mean, well, and it does sound like that whatever medication they had, like they wanted to continue
Mhm.
using. So
Yeah.
it gives you the impression that it was treatable with medicine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like, I mean, yeah, sometimes you can get families that can scrape together what they need to buy medicine, but the medicine alone won't do it. And,
Yeah.
and then they start looking at things like therapy and find out that whatever their provider with work is doesn't provide mental health benefits. And
Well, not to mention, if she's a stay-at-home mom,
mhm,
there's not going to be mental health benefits to that. If she has a mental health condition that can be debilitating, is she able to work? You know what I mean? There's some
right,
pieces to that too that just add to that. And again, it all depends on the person's situation. We can't broad brush stroke that to fit some political narrative. Each family is different, but there are cases where I mean, how sad that could medicine have like solved all of this and saved this family from so much. And then kids have experienced a massive amount of trauma. So guess what's going to happen? You know what I mean? It's like this.
right.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I'm really glad for how much this movie was able to get me to kind of think about those things, and
Hmm.
it has helped me kind of gain perspective in the work that I do. I mean, I do similar but different work than what you do. I'm a family support worker, but this movie with that situation, those sound bites, those really spoke to me professionally.
Yeah.
When it's all said and over, like, I mean, they finally, everything gets figured out. Everybody is safe. Everybody's going to be okay. And he gets congratulated.
That was probably one piece of this movie that frustrated me a little bit because I'm watching someone who has been taken off the street, off the beat. It was interesting and frustrating at the same time because he really struggled in that space. And there were several moves that he made throughout the movie that were so not appropriate. Trying to do the investigating on his own and
Hmm.
not playing his role, and
Sending
not,
his partner into a home that they didn't have a
yes.
warrant for.
Well, and when
Um,
he started like digging in for information that really wasn't his space to be doing, those were pieces that in the end he was able to help. He made a positive impact. But how often does that not make a positive impact? And the problem for me is that he was going off of his current belief system, his current understanding of the situation, and
mhm.
then he was attacking it, right? And then he learns a little bit more and he attacked that. And then he learns a little bit more and he attacks at that. And it was a good reminder to me about how the system is set up the way the system is set up for a reason. And that is because the 911 call center respondent does not have a full picture. The police officer may not have a full picture. The highway patrol might not have a full picture. You've got all of these people that come into these cases and into these situations to put more eyes on it so that you can form a full picture of what's happening. And that was a piece where I was like, that's, would this have been solved faster had he not overstepped? Had he, you know what I mean? Like, and what could have happened if it didn't turn out okay?
Right.
This wasn't a movie with a happy ending, in my opinion. I mean, there
No,
was a little tiny bit of relief that everyone was okay, but it wasn't a happy ending.
but
It was
it was
a
almost
tragic
disastrous.
story. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He saved the day in the end when he made necessary and immediate adjustments to what he was doing. He begged this woman to not jump and to not do something permanent, to
Mhm.
not commit suicide by jumping off the bridge.
Yeah.
He begged her, and I think the quote was, "You have people who love you."
Didn't he say, "I promised Abby you'd come home
Yeah,
to
I
her"?
promised Abby
Yeah.
you'd come home safe. I promised her. Thankfully, she went to
Mhm.
the police when they showed up, and she was okay. it's a damn miracle that everything was okay. I mean, imagine if, I mean, this is a movie. This is a story that is written. Imagine that happening in real life. It would be a lot messier than this.
The interesting thing is how often is this real life? I think oftentimes as professionals in helping fields of whatever kind, we all come to that space regularly where we have to justify, will the ends justify the means? Like, we have these dilemmas that come up, and you have to really sort out, because that is the stuff of a great story. That's the stuff of a hero movie,
Right.
is when the ends justifies the means, and the rules that you broke to get there and all of that stuff.
Right.
But in this case, I don't know if Henry got hurt, but you had a police officer who was encouraging someone in the full throes of a mental crisis to harm the individual who was trying to save her, right?
Right.
Because he didn't have a full understanding of the situation.
Right.
And so, it was a cautionary tale for me in that, to say, in this case, thank goodness it worked out, but it doesn't always happen like that. And did it really work out? It still caused a lot of harm and wreaked a lot of havoc in a lot of places. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a good piece of it. So,
Well, and the congratulations that he got was from, first off, it was the the LA County dispatch for the sheriff's department, or the highway patrol, one or the other. And then he got some congratulations from his sergeant when she tells him, good job, Baylor. And then she came through with something that stuck with me a lot. And that was when she said, broken people save broken people. It put into mind why I'm good at what I do. I've lived a very dynamic life.
Well, Mr. Rogers said it right. Look for the helpers.
Look
right?
for the helpers.
I think that is a common thing amongst most people who are in helping professions of all kinds. Those, we used to joke about it. Do you remember, like, when we were way younger and we'd hear about one of our friends going into psychology? We're like, that's because they needed counseling. You know what I mean? Like, we used to
Right.
joke about how the crazy ones went into psychology.
Yeah.
But truly, like, I mean, what better people to be doing that work than people who understand,
People who've been affected by it.
Yes.
People who've been through it.
The redemptive quality of this movie was after that line, when he made some hard choices and decided that he wasn't going to fight. He wasn't going to fight it. He was going to own what happened, own what he did, and owned his part of it. And I hope in that he was able to forgive himself in that too, because I think that that's part of being of unbreaking, right? Of healing, is
Right.
to learn to forgive others, but also super important to forgive ourselves so that we can heal and move forward.
Right. Going from almost being single-handedly responsible for tragedy to suddenly needing to fix a whole line of mistakes that were made, that were putting lives in danger, over the course of this movie. Putting myself in Baylor's position, I would think that I have just equalized the mistakes that I have made today. And I don't need to equalize anymore, because this one is not one that I can fix.
Right.
And now it's just time to take responsibility. So I'm kind of changing the name of this little section that I do. I've been calling it the medicinal part. But I've kind of decided that I'm going to call it the active ingredient.
Okay.
Now I'd kind of shared mine a little preemptively earlier. But was there an active ingredient in this for you? Something that changed you, something that made you whole, something that healed you?
I don't know if I can name it. I guess I don't know if I can be eloquent enough to be like, this is the thing. But I think that what I take away from this movie is an emphasis on the value and importance that should be placed on mental health for our first responders of all kinds, police officers, firefighters, because in the midst of all of this, they're in the middle of like wildfires in California, right? And that is terrifying and traumatizing as it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just I often wonder who cares for those that care for us. You know what I mean? Who cares for those people who are standing in those spaces between us and disaster all the time
Mm-hmm.
and feeling a real sense of responsibility in making sure that that is in spaces where maybe they can't say it, that somebody is saying it. So there's
Right.
that. I guess also, I don't know, for me, this just puts such an emphasis on the work that I do and why I do it, and how necessary it is for people to have support in learning how to speak up, learning how to advocate for themselves, learning how to participate in their own well-being and their own care, and how to tell their story and how to seek help when they need it. Because all of those things, I think, played into what happened to this family. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
were they not effectively able to say, this is what's happening and this is what we need? And, all of those things. And it just, and this happened in 2020. I mean, that's just a couple years ago, it's 4 years ago. If this was written in 2020, it's still needed and it's still necessary. And so I guess that's, it like sparks myself, like it sparks the work for me. So
Right.
yeah, active
Yeah.
ingredients.
I can go along with that too. I mean, aside from, the ones that I had earlier. Yeah.
Well, I had quite a few too. I mean, this movie was full of those. Like you said, there's a lot to unpack because there's
Yeah.
lots of little nuances if you're paying attention.
Yes. All right. Well, that's the guilty. Now here's your turn to plug yourself and plug your things.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm able to do this episode with you is because we're on a little hiatus over at Roundtable Mindset. We're taking the month of May off to just kind of update and reboot and refresh and unplug and all kinds of things. And so we're coming back though in June with more of our Talk About It Tuesday, which is our podcast short, is kind of what we call it. It's about news articles and we kind of riff on what's happening in the news. And then season 2 of our podcast is all about having difficult conversations and all of the types of difficult conversations that we have, and, kind of using the skills in perspective taking. And, we kind of put together a whole list of tools that you can really use when you're having those difficult conversations. So, if you're interested, we'd love for you to hop over and listen. We're on all the major platforms, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram.
For my listeners out there, if you have an idea for a movie, or if you would like to challenge me to find a therapeutic purpose in a movie, or even if you'd like to be on an episode, send an email to contact@movie-rx.com, or you can call or text. I've got a phone number at 402-519-5790. I mean, you can even just tell me that I'm wrong or something. Like, I mean, you can do whatever you want. Just send me a message, and I'd like to shout out some of my listeners. But thank you all for listening, and remember, this movie is not intended to treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We'll see you at the next appointment.